background was fantastic. It got us all going in our gardens, and I feel ashamed as a birder that I knew nothing about other aspects of wildlife. I've got 80 species of hovers in my garden and about 40 species of bees, and until 2020 I knew nothing about any of them. So it's been good for me anyway in that sense. So I'm going to talk you through the year, a little bit of background and everything. These are 3 fantastic Northumbrian species: Arizona, Serphoides, Chrysotoxum festivum, and Anismaya lineata, which is a wetland hover and entirely dependent on small ponds, really. So that's a good link back there. Thanks very much, Ross. Where are we going? There we go. So preview, we're just going to talk a little bit about classification, where the hovers fit, a few interesting background facts, habits and lifestyles, story of the year, and some representative lifestyles that are shown up by hovers that appear at different times of year. A little bit about local places to find hovers, including ponds. Techniques to study. I just thought this is all you need to become a hoverator, as we call ourselves. Then a few resources, and want to end up with one of my favourites. I used to be an educator, so we had to have some objectives. So by the end of this talk, I hope that you're more fascinated by hovers than you are at the moment. You've learned a bit about their phenology, the timing through the year, their ecology and their relationships. You know some basic families and some widespread species, but I'm not concentrating on identification at all. Have a few ideas on how and where to find them. And hoverating starts in February in Northumberland, and I'll show you our February hover as we go along. So the hovers are in the family Serpidae, which sits in the class Insecta and the order Flies. So the flies are insects that have one pair of wings plus the whole tail, which is the little remnant wing which enables them to fly backwards and forwards and hover and change direction very rapidly. It's a nice group to start off with. There are about 290 species in the UK, which is manageable, about the same as bees actually. It's not like, crane flies or ichneumons or sawflies or something, which have just got far too many. It's a bit bigger than dragonflies, butterflies and ladybirds, which are all in the 50s. They vary in size from this very, very small Bacca elongata, one of my favourite hovers. It hovers backwards and forwards in the garden, just like a little nymph. It's absolutely beautiful. You can barely see it. To some wasp-like creatures like Volucella zonara, which I think is on the next slide. I have to apologise for my Latin names. I probably completely mangle them. I know no Latin, so the pronunciation is my pronunciation, not the correct one probably. But we do tend to use the scientific binomial names for most hovers amongst enthusiasts. The names, there are 1 or 2 books that have given them names, but they're very obscure and not widely used. So some interesting facts. This is a Cryarrhina what's it called? Just a minute. Yeah, can't remember. Cryarrhina flocosa, that's it. One of the springtime hovers. So a few interesting ones. Now, hovers are found in pretty much any ecological niche in Northumbria. You get them in treetops, you get them in hedgerows, you get them in gardens. You can find them on sea rocket on the beach, completely, right on the strand line, feeding on plants there. They're very, very common in the pine forests of our uplands, in meadows, etc. So wherever you are, there's hovers to look out for. Hovers migrate. This is very surprising, I think, to a lot of people. There are so many migrate through the passes of the Pyrenees that they can be seen on radar, the mass of them. And on a hot June or July day when there's some insect migration across the North Sea, many thousands of them turn up on North Sea oil rigs as they make their way across from the continent to the UK. So, very interesting. They're very well known for their Batesian mimicry. So Bates described a mimicry of insects for wasps and bees to protect them. I don't know how many people are enthusiastic about bees here, but you cannot argue that this hoverfly looks very much like the common carder bee, which is so common, probably one of our commonest bumblebees. If anyone wants to ask me a question at the end, I can tell you an amusing anecdote about that, but we probably don't have time to add it in at the moment. Anyway, they're very important in agriculture. So we all think about the bees. When you speak to people about pollinators, they're like, yes, I'm going to get a beehive. Getting a beehive to me, without being rude to any beekeepers, is a bit like putting cows in the Serengeti. You don't save the zebras by putting cows there. So hovers are incredibly important in terms of pollination, but also in killing pest species like aphids and scale insects. And I found this reference to the services to agriculture that they do. That's a vast amount of money that they're providing for us if we take care of them. So a good case for taking care of hovers. A little bit about their lifestyle. So they have a very simple lifestyle, like a butterfly. Should we start with the egg or the adult? We'll start with the egg. They start as an egg, then you've got the caterpillar, the larval stage, maybe 2 or 3 instars of that as they get bigger. They mainly pupate over the winter in the ground. If you kind of scoop up a bunch of leaf litter from the forest or anything, you can often find larvae and pupae in there, and then they go back to the adult. Now, the adults all have generally a very similar lifestyle, so they feed on nectar and pollen. The larvae is where the interest is and where their ecological diversity is wide, because the larvae have many, many different lifestyles. So we've talked about the ones that feed in ponds already. So the rat-tailed larvae feed on detritus in the bottom of wet places, bottom of reeds, etc. I'll show you that later on. Some of them are specialists on aphids, so just like your ladybird larvae that you like to have in the garden to eat up all the aphids that are eating your roses, then the larvae of hoverflies are also big consumers of aphids. Some of them use a plant matter as their feeding material. So the egg is laid on the plant that is the host plant, and the larvae burrows inside into the roots and the tubers and eats the base of the plant. So here, the 3 hovers that are pictured here are all the same species, Meridon equestris, all of them impersonating different bumblebees. So there can be very interesting variation within the same species. And Meridon equestris is thought to have come over from Holland about 20 years ago. It's a new species for the UK, and it came in with bulb imports, daffodils, tulips, whatever. And you might get this in your house now, if you've got some hyacinth bulbs or something that's someone's given you for Christmas and they're just about to start flowering. I get messages from friends saying, "What's this in my house?" And I say, "You've got a narcissus in your garden or in your house or whatever." So they come out quite early at this time of year, sometimes. And the other ones use thistles. Decaying wood is another source. So just like a beetle larvae will live inside decaying wood, the hoverfly larvae live inside there. And sap runs are a really interesting habitat. So in a sap run, which is sugary sap from the tree, there's a lot of bacteria and fungi that are in this kind of fermenting sap. And quite a few hoverflies, the larvae feed in that kind of soup of bacteria and fungi. And even more specialist ones live on the detritus in a bee's nest or a wasp's nest. So Volucella zonaria is the hornet mimic hoverfly, and it lays its eggs in the base of the hornet nest, goes into the nest and lays its egg, gets out again alive, and the larvae lives in the base of the nest, not eating the larvae or attacking the larvae, just clearing up the detritus from the nest. There are another whole group that live in ant nests as well, which is really interesting. So here are some other typical genera that you might already be familiar with. From the top left, Surface, everyone's standard hoverfly, 3 or 4 species in the UK, very common. The second one is Ringia, which is a very, very interesting looking hoverfly with its little long nose. Its lifestyle is cowpats, so it lays its eggs on cowpats and the larvae live in the cowpat. Obviously a bit threatened by too much pesticides in cowpats. The ones on the yellow daisy are Episurfus balteatus, the marmalade hoverfly. People are very familiar with that. Our only hoverfly that has 3 colours across its abdomen, black, silver and gold, usually, sometimes just black, sometimes just gold, but anyway, very common. And in the midsummer you can often see countless of them on one flower. Then we have Skiva salonetica, which is one of our migrant hoverflies. So this one only appears some years in the northeast in, say, July, August time, other years none at all. This is Chrysotoctum bisynctum, a big genus, very colourful, very beautiful. Chilosia, 40 species in this genus, mostly black, difficult to identify, most of you need a microscope. People are probably familiar with Hoverflies pendulus, sometimes called the footballer hover. I think it must be the colour of Millwall in the 1960s or something, the shirt that he's wearing. But there's black and yellow striped, vertical stripes. And this is one of the ones that likes ponds, the group that live in detritus around the edge of water. And last but not least, Aristalis pertinax. So Aristalis, the drone hoverfly. This is the one that if you're out in your garden in spring or summer, it flies out and buzzes you in the face and then flies back and sits in the sun. So very common, the drone hover. Anyway, that's just some of our basic genera. Right, let's just go through the seasons then. So, spring. Spring is about to start for hovers. The first ones come out in February, and the food sources, the places to look if you want to find hovers at this time of year is willow trees of any kind. Vast amount of their food stuff is coming from willow. Certainly in the wild, willows are about the only thing that's flowering in February, March. Coltsfoot comes along end of March, and then dandelions. But if you go to hardwoods or to up the coconut or somewhere where there's lots of willows, hundreds of insects feeding on them in February, March on a nice sunny day. You don't always find them around their food sources. Any kind of nice sunny place, they love sunbathing. So it's quite easy to find hovers sunbathing a lot of the time. So any pale posts, pale trees, ash trees in particular, they love those, sitting out from 3 or 4 weeks' time. Typical species that you might see on the top, this is Chilosia grossa, one of the really nice furry coloured Chilosias that is early spring flying. This is Melanogyna lasiophthalma, which again is one of our really typical spring hovers, only comes out for a few weeks, end of April they're already finished. And then the last one is one of my favourites, Creorhina ranunculi. This one feeds mainly on willows, although ranunculi might suggest it feeds on buttercups and must do as well. But it's really early spring, and it's often flying around the tops of willows. It looks just like a bumblebee, it's the size of a bumblebee. And you really need your long-handled net. If you're doing some hoverating, a net that's 12 foot long is quite helpful to catch some of these and have a look at them in the hand. And it's quite easy to catch them, extract them from the net in your hand, and photograph them and release them. So it gives you much more variety of what you can see. So this is Melanogyna quadrimaculata. This is our February hover. I think my earliest record is February the 14th. So really, very, very early flying. And they're always resting on the same fence posts at Upham, between Upham and Morpeth. There's a little area where I seem to find them. But if you can see here, the 5 little dots in our area represent something like 20 or 30 records. And until one person in Lothian, in the last 2 or 3 years, suddenly decided to go out and look for it, there were virtually no records, across the whole of the UK. As I say, now somebody in Lothian has made it their specialist job to go out and find this hover, I think. But I know there's at least 4 people who are members of NHSN who've recorded this, it's nice to go out and find it. I even had it in my garden, which I thought was very lucky. So I think that's a bit of a regional specialty, Melanogyna quadrimaculata. This is another of the nice colourful Chilosias that come out in spring, Chilosia albipilla, and this is the one that lays its eggs at the base of marsh thistle, or in the rosette. So in February, March, April time, the thistle hasn't got its stem coming up yet, it's just got a leaf rosette, and you can find the females laying their eggs on the leaf rosette, and then the larva burrows into the stem as it starts to grow and eats the inside of the stem. Quite a short flying period. I've not found this many times, just a couple of times at Hardwood and Old Park Woods, which are two of my favourite places to go. But apparently if you get a knife and cut up the stems of marsh thistles, then it's quite easy to find the larva in midsummer. So, never done that. Right, so that's the typical early spring hovers. If we then move on to May, I guess that meteorologically May might be spring, but from a biodiversity point of view, it's kind of early summer really. And so obviously species diversity is increasing, the temperature's warming up. But if you look at the map of a lot of hovers, there are a lot that don't, and bees and other things, there are a lot that don't occur in the northeast, which occur in Edinburgh and in Cumbria, even further north than us. But we're held back with these early spring species by a slightly colder weather, so that can put it off. A day when there's a strong har and it's 5 degrees near the sea is not helpful to us. Anyway, now, obviously we've still got things sunbathing, cherry laurel. If you've got cherry laurel in your garden, or if you've got any cherry laurel near you, it's a very good place to find hovers sunbathing. Some of the trees are starting to flower, so we've had blackthorn probably in April, but by May we've got hawthorn and rowan, and they can be very, very productive. And again, there's getting buzzed by aerostalis pertinax in the garden. So some hovers are univoltine, like they just have one brood, one family, and one cycle per year. And many of those species are most active now in May, and that's the one brood is done, finished by the end of May. Others are bivoltine, or maybe they even have 3 generations. So like butterflies, some of them have 3 generations, and you can find lots of, say, red admirals in August when you don't see many in May, by the time they get to their 3rd generation. So many of the Chalosia species are bivoltine. They actually were thought to be different species. The spring generation and the summer generation actually look quite different. And until recently, some of them were thought to be two totally different species, but are now recognised to be the same species that's just got different forms. So timing is quite crucial for some of these things. So just take you through a few of the spring ones. This is Portabina maculata. Beautiful little hover, black and grey, unlike pretty much any other hover. This is a specialist on ramsons. I don't know why I haven't got a photo of this hover on ramsons. It only feeds on ramsons, pretty much. And I haven't got a photo, which surprised me. But this was thought to be a rare species in Northumberland, with very few records until lockdown. And now, the little group of us that are recording hovers a lot, there's about 10 of us, really recording hovers quite a lot now in Northumberland. We've shown that this is actually a common species in VC67. I found it in VC68, just north of the Coquette as well. But wherever you find ramsons, so presumably along the river near you, is the ramsons along there?
Along the Tyne Valley, yes.
Yeah. So it's quite common, but it's got a very narrow time period. So I just looked at my garden records. Basically, 4 or 5 weeks is its flight period, and then it's over and done with for the whole year. But as you'll know, that's the time when ramsons is flowering. So it's larva mine the roots. This is Pipitza lutea tarsis. So Pipitzas are rather hard to identify. Small black hairy dragonflies, but you can see lutea tarsis, yellow legs. So it's got yellow feet. And this is in my garden, and it's laid its eggs on elms, Dutch elm. So I've got some scrappy Dutch elms in my garden, and this hoverfly, its larvae eat this particular aphid, Schizonura ulme. Ulme is elm, so it's an aphid that lives on elm, and that's its food source. So quite easy to find if you've got some elms, but again, only for a few weeks. This has got a nice story, Parasurface nigrotarsis. So this one, its larvae feed on dock beetle larvae. So this is dock beetle eggs on the underside of the dock leaf in April, May, and the hover lays its egg amongst these eggs. It looks slightly different. I've never found the egg yet, but you can find it by looking for the egg. Just look under dock leaves, and it's got a slightly different coloured yellow egg. There were, I think, no records. Chris Barlow, I think, had the first record for this hover in Northumberland, and it was actually on the outside of my garden, and I wasn't in. And he was looking at it on the outside of my garden, and I didn't know it was there. And then I found some up at Alan Banks later on, and I found them at Beacon Hill as well. But it seems to have a very short time period, which is not surprising. I mean, the dock beetle lays its eggs in a very short time period, and it's got to lay its egg at exactly the right time, just like a cuckoo. You know, it's no good a cuckoo coming along and laying its egg in the meadow its nest 3 weeks later, so it's got to lay it in the right week. So, got a very short time. It may well still be around, but it may just be feeding in the tops of trees, and it's not, you know, at the ground level. So, we don't find it after that. Anyway, Parasurfus nigritatis. Literally 2 weeks and it's over and done with, in terms of us being able to find it. Another couple of nice spring hovers. So the first one, Brachyopia scutularis. It looks a bit like certain species of flies, but it lays its eggs in sap runs, particularly of horse chestnut and beech. Another one of the Brachyopas is laying its eggs only in pink horse chestnuts. And I actually found that in Morpeth a couple of years ago. In fact, someone else has recorded it in Newcastle as well now. So there are only 2 records of that one. But this one I think probably is horse chestnuts. This is from my garden. I don't know if you've walked along the Stanners or Scotch Gill Woods around Morpeth in recent times, but all of the horse chestnuts there are dying, and dying rapidly. So at the moment they've got lots of lovely sap runs. They get some kind of canker, which is killing them, some fungal kind of disease, as well as the horse chestnut leaf miner, which is not helping them. But it seems that a lot of our horse chestnuts are dying at the moment, which is quite sad. But anyway, it's very nice hollow, very few records in Northumberland to be looked out for in the middle of May. This other one is a real favourite of mine. This one actually can be found a bit through the year, but it tends to be sunbathing in May quite nicely. Ferdinandia cuprea. I think it's called copper brassy hoverfly or something like that is its English kind of name. It's a beautiful thing with a beautiful brassy kind of abdomen and shiny thorax. And again, it is one that uses old trees for its larval. And the last of the May hovers, this is Epistrophe elegans. This is a fantastic looking little thing. It's like a little jewel, you know, beautiful kind of goldy, coppery, very shiny, quite common. Again, same flight period, last week of April to the first week of May, in my records anyway. You can get, I can get about 10 or 20 of these in my garden at once at this time of year. So it's quite common anywhere where there's a bit of semi-natural habitat. Very nice, shiny, coppery colour. Right, so if we move on to the full summer, and then obviously we've got a much wider variety of plants. So if you know anywhere that looks like this, this could be silvermink or rising sun or the boundaries of roads in our uplands, you know, along the edge of Harwood or Bellingham or somewhere. Anywhere that's got semi-natural grassland with umbellifers, knapweed, any type of daisy type things. This is where you're going to find a lot of species, and it's absolutely, you know, you can spend hours, well I can spend hours here, get completely lost. Hot days, hovers like sun generally, but they don't like it too hot. Not normally a problem in the northeast, but once it gets up to early to mid-20s, certainly once it's over 25, a lot of the hovers hide away and you know, just kind of go down into the vegetation and aren't very visible. So if it's really hot, don't go out expecting to find a lot of hovers. Look early in the morning, late in the evening. If I'm cooking the kids' tea at home and it's a hot summer's day, I nearly always get distracted by going out and looking at my sunbathing areas between 6 and 8 in the evening. That's when the hovers really come out and are often very active in the middle of the summer. It's quite possible to find at least 30 species in a day. I'd love to try and do a big hover week, see if I can find 100 species in a week in Northumberland. I think it would probably be possible. A lot of species are very active, and the key families are the daisies and the umbellifers. So hogweed. Does anyone have hogweed in their garden? Do they let hogweed grow in their garden? it started growing in mine, and I thought, God, I'm going to get rid of that, but I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. Now I just allow a small number of plants in one sunny corner, and it's absolutely unbelievable. And what they're doing here is they're after the aphids. So the middle picture is hogweed aphids, which are very profuse here. Last year was a good year. The year before, there were hardly any, and most of the hogweed specialists were in short supply. But last year, there was masses of them. And you can see there's masses of food there for the larvae of countless insects, aren't there? They're not only good for hovers, but and you can see on this bloom here, countless insects can be found on one hogweed flower. At least 100 insects of different orders. It's very good for beetles and for all types of bees and sawflies and everything, ladybirds, butterflies. So concentrate on hogweed, you'll never be disappointed. Here are some hogweed specialists. So this is Crassicastus solstice. This one's here to trip you up. Solstice dititalis left. Chalosia illustrata, one of the chalosias that is easy to identify. It's got a little orange bum and a white patch on its abdomen. And the two leucozonas, Leucozona glaucia, of which we'll have a bit more later, and Leucozona laterania. So these are real hogweed specialists. You mostly don't see them away from hogweed or angelica. They're really dependent on this for their food source. So I thought I might just give you a sample of one day looking at hovers in the summer. So we're not going to go into masses of detail about these individual species, but I've got 3 slides that just come from this one day. Silverlink, many of you I'm sure know Silverlink Park. It's really good, got a mixture of different habitats. I've learnt recently this is called open mosaic grassland. It's the specialist type. They're trying to recreate some at Pot and Burn. And it's basically kind of post-industrial, what we might otherwise call a brownfield site. And it's made up of open areas with poor soil, often a bit of rubble and stuff. So you get open and bare areas, and then sometimes seeded, sometimes not seeded, meadows and stuff, and some amenity woodlands. So it's quite a mixture of habitats. Very good. So we've got 2 different types of Eupioides, the top left and this one, and 2 different species of Eupioides. We've got Chrysatoxum distinctum, we've got Sciva selenisica, Surface, I'll come back to that one, Epistrophe gracilaris, Sciva pyrastri, Chrysatoxum festivum, and Helophilus pendulus. So these are large black and yellow hovers. These are, ones that are easy to approach. With a small camera, you can get close to them. They're not tiny little things which are difficult to see. They're all about, 2 centimetres in size. So quite easy to find, sitting out in the open, suitable for all of us to get interested in. Of course, there are some small ones that are less difficult, less easy to identify and everything. You need good photos for some of these, but Metascavia, there are 2 species of Metascavia, top left, 2 species of Melanostoma that are common. Cerita pipiens, the 3rd one, is a very lovely little hover. It's always very energetic, and the males are always looking for a mate, and they hover around where insects are feeding, and they pretty much try and mate with whatever they can. They're often get the genus wrong, they're trying to mate with some big fly, their own species, so they're very funny little things. And then Episurfus balteatus, this is one that doesn't have silver stripes on it, the marmalade hover, just got gold and black. Melangina, mid-summer hovers. Spherophoria, this is scripta, and that's the one that can't be identified without examination under a microscope. And Neoaschia, and some others. Anyway, I'll maybe just highlight here the one with the spotty eyes, Aristoremus sepulchralis, which is one of our really nice hovers. There are only 2 species in the UK that have interestingly patterned eyes, but in Spain and France or whatever, last year I saw some with very stripy, beautiful stripy eyes. So there are quite a wide variety of species. summer wetlands, ponds. So these are some of the things that, looking in different habitat types will obviously help you find lots of different hovers. Most of the ones that occur in wetlands are in the Aristaridae tribe. And these are the ones that have the rat-tailed maggot, which you can see at the bottom. This is the larva of the Aristaridae tribe. Little siphon to get air, because it lives in damp, wet conditions at the bottom of boggy reeds, and the mouth at the other end to feed. So that's the typical larva. Here we've got Tropica skita, which is very rare in Northumberland. I think we're a bit too dry here. It's common in Cumbria, but I've only seen it twice in Northumberland. You go over to Cumbria and get over the border, I found loads one day. Then we've got from the top, Anismaya contracta and Anismaya lineata. These are ones that are found in relatively few sites in Northumberland, but they're probably much more widespread, but people don't look for them. And you've actually got to really look in the fringes of the reed bed or the fringes of the marsh. Sometimes they come out and feed on the angelica or water droplet, but often they're just scuzzing around inside the marsh, and you actually got to really look quite hard for them. And a different type of Hoverflies down the bottom there, Hoverflies hybridus, similar to pendulous, but without the black band across the middle. Anyway, just worth pointing out that looking in different habitats will give you a wider variety of species. If we move on to late summer, how are we doing for time? Okay. Then we move away from the umbellifers and the daisies, well, different types of daisies, thistles and knapweed, and devil's bit scabious are really the things that are in the wild areas, providing the most food source for hovers by now. Warrington Walled Garden is unbelievable. I mean, that continues right until the end of October, and it's full of fantastic flowers, and there are hundreds of hovers there from August right through to October. But in the wild, you're really down to thistles and knapweed as our main kind of food plants. But of course, at this time of year, those multi-volatile species, they're breeding up each generation exponentially. So there could be thousands of hovers in good habitat. I once counted, the road to Harwood is about 10 k's, and I counted the number of Elastarus pertinax in just 200 metres, and it was 500. So if you multiply that up over 10 k's, it's like tens of thousands of hovers, just the one species. There were loads of all the other species as well. So it's really quite spectacular. Lots and lots and lots of fantastic hovers to look at. Mostly common species, but others as well. So there aren't many new species coming out now, but it's still easy to see 20 or 30 species in a day, or in 3 or 4 hours. Serica Maya superbiens is one of the ones that I really like, so that's at the top left here. It looks very much like one did at the beginning, but it's not the same one. And this is a species that is really dependent on devil's bit scabious and knapweed at this time of year. Harwood is one of its best sites, but I've found it Allen Banks, I've actually seen it at Mitford once, and a few other sites. Old Park Wood is quite common, but there's relatively few hectares it's been recorded at in the whole of the country. So it's quite special for Northumberland. And then we've got Serica Maya no, I've got that the wrong way around, Lapona and Sinensis, and then Arizona Serpoides and Arizona Megasurface. Again, these are scarce upland hovers, huge. These are the size of a bumblebee, and they're feeding out in the open, easy to approach with your camera. If you use an SLR camera, you can photograph it from 3 or 4 meters away. If you use a small one like this, then you can photograph it from a foot away. And they're quite easy to identify. So a nice day out at Harwood then is really fun. And then by the time we move on through into later September, October and November, our food sources change again. So one of the things I think is really helpful at this time of year is Michaelmas daisies. There's a big patch of Michaelmas daisies at Snap Point, which always has hundreds of insects on it. And in the gardens at Wallington, similarly, there's a lot of Michaelmas daisy. So in a patch like this, you might find well over 100 hovers, 8 or 10 different species. And ivy is fantastic as well. The first one here is Aristolinus aeneus, which is the other one with the spotty eyes. This is a hover that seems to be only found at Snab in our area, or at least in Northumberland. I haven't looked in Teesside. But its young live in rotting seaweed. So the larvae, it lays its eggs on rotting seaweed. And if anyone knows Snap Point, it's got that little indent where the seaweed kind of can build up and rot and doesn't get washed out to sea again. So it's got a very particular ecology. And it feeds on the Michaelmas daisies and sea mayweed and stuff there. But then the ivy is where to go as well at this time of year. We're looking for our ivy bee. We can look for some hovers as well. And places I tend to go often in churchyards. So Witherington Churchyard is fantastic. Bedlington Churchyard is very good. And then near Clark's Bog in Morpeth, there's quite a lot of hedgerows with a lot of ivy. These are just places I go. Anywhere where there's a lot of flowering ivy, you can find a lot of hovers. So it's just to generally illustrate how many species you can find on a quick day in October. That's September, but they're equally active in October. Now obviously, winter used to be a time when we would collate our records, stick them all on iRecord, maybe look at a few specimens if we collect specimens. But times are changing. And December the 19th this year, I found 4 species. I've never found a single hover foraging in December before this year. I found 1 or 2 resting on gravestones like ladybirds, but I've never found any foraging. But on December the 19th, it was 11, 12 degrees or something, ridiculous weather. And I went out and I had 4 species while I was looking for ladybirds. There was 4 species of hovers. So maybe December, we can even do a bit of hoverating in December. Certainly in the south, like, you know, in the Facebook group, the national Facebook group, there's people in Dorset who are seeing, you know, 5, 10 species every day in December and January. So, right, so some of the key sites, I've mentioned most of them already. So Silver Lincoln Rising Sun, if you live close to the city, they are fantastic. Gosforth probably is underexplored. I haven't done much operating at GNR, but certainly the meadow at the top end, where there's Devil's Bit scabious and knapweed and stuff, is quite good. I've seen quite a few species there. Probably I know some of the rare winter woodland species have been there. Chris has recorded, I think, Charcas Serpus and Morum and stuff. And, yeah. So there's certainly some interesting ones to be found there. Anywhere at the coast where there's natural grassland is very good. Tynemouth is very good if you live around that area, but pretty much anywhere. Summerhouse Lane is an interesting place. If you're going past Wansbeck Hospital, on the right-hand side, there's some ponds on the right-hand side, and by the roundabout, if you park at that big roundabout where there's nearly always a food stall, you can walk down to those ponds. That's got loads of hovers and loads of dragonflies. It's a sink pond of some kind, mining subsidence pond. It's, yeah, a road goes right into it and out the other side where the road used to be at, you know, not pond level. So that's a really, really good site for hovers and dragonflies. People who know me know that I'm very interested in the Wansbeck Valley. So the lower Wansbeck Valley, Bothell Sawmill is a fantastic site. Burrow Woods in Morpeth, Scotch Gill. As I say, my garden, I've got about 80 species of hoverflies in my garden. I'm a terrible gardener. I live on a north side of a hill which has got wet springs coming out from it. Doesn't get any sun for 4 months of the year, and I had tried when I was younger to be a proper gardener, and anything I planted died. So I decided about 3 years ago that I would just get some plug plants and plant a meadow and, you know, hedgerow plants that I knew grew everywhere in Northumberland. So I've got woundwort and scabious and knapweed. I think I planted about 20 different things. It's unbelievable. Saves you any gardening. They're all perennials. You never have to do a single bit of gardening, and they're amazing for pollinators. So, you know, as well as the sunbathing areas, I've got a kind of natural meadow now, and it's really fantastic. Longhurst Colliery pools, that's another sink pond, just near Longhurst Colliery, very, very good for dragonflies, very good for wetland hovers. Then we go to Upper Wansbeck, Sweet Hope is nice. The guy who runs the fishery there is normally very friendly. If you ask him if you can have a walk around the lake and look for insects, he's fine. Harwood is just unbelievable and hardly explored really. I mean, you know, a few of us who go there, we tend to go to the same spots. If we went further in and drove all the way out to Simonside through the woods, it would be amazing as well. Old Potwood, they're doing some good work there. It's on the Trevelyan estate that felled the wood, the pine plantation and planted out kind of mixed woodlands. Rothley Lakes is very good. I've got permission to go there from the National Trust. Coquet Valley, I haven't really been to a lot of these other places, so I tend not to go far, but I'm sure that's just as good. And then churchyards. If you've got a semi-natural churchyard near you, I'm sure there'll be lots there. So, as I say, this is the only equipment you need. This is the best bit of kit that was ever invented, the Olympus Tough camera. Fairly cheap. It's got a magnifying function. You can photograph the hairs on the eyes of hovers with this, in the field and in the hand. So it's, you know, it's 350 quid. It's not that cheap, but it's fairly reasonable, and that's what I use to take photographs. I tend to find with a phone, it doesn't focus on what I want it to focus on. So I don't use a phone, but maybe non-iPhone is better. If you're interested in catching specific hovers, one of these little nets is quite good. So you see the hover you want and you just catch that one, and then you hold it up to the light and extract its legs and have a look at it in hand. But if you want to collect specimens and do some more representative sampling of species, then a bit of sweeping, so you get a bigger net and you just sweep through the vegetation and you get a lot of hovers as well as other things. But then you tend to need to use the eyes and look at them under a microscope. So if you don't take specimens, that's not so appropriate. But you know, taking specimens is probably really important for studying hovers beyond a certain level. So there's a whole bunch of species that haven't been recorded in Northumberland, which must be here. And so we're trying to fill some gaps by collecting a few targeted specimens in the areas, like, you know, the small black holes that otherwise can't be identified. And then some people are really into larval rearing. So if you sift through sycamore litter, or you cut into thistles or whatever, there's 100 different ways that you can find larvae of hovers and then rear them over the winter and then have them in the spring. Look at dock beetle eggs, for example, and find the larvae. So there's a whole Facebook group dedicated to hoverfly larvae rearing. So I haven't tried that. But it's an interesting thing to do. What about citizen science? Like NHSN, the Hoverfly recording scheme is fantastic for citizen science. It's got more than 1.5 million records. It's getting more than 100,000 records a year. You can either just stick them on the Facebook group and tell them where you saw it and the date of the place, and they'll take the record off there, or you can stick it on iRecord and they'll take it off there, or they've got their own recording software as well. They all get verified by one person who must be, I don't know how he manages to verify all the records, but he does. If you stick one on record, they're verified within 24 hours. It's fantastic. They're a very positive group as well, the Facebook group. You never get any snarky comments, which you can get on some other groups about, haven't you seen that before, or whatever. You never get that. You know, even if you made the same mistake 100 times, you just get a nice, what's this? So I think they're probably as well understood as our moths and our butterflies and our dragonflies in many ways. And it's, you know, being used to publish some papers, which is great as well. Hovers were very under-recorded in Northumberland until, you know, lockdown. I live in Hectads NZ18, and there was 16 hover species recorded in the 10 kilometre square that I live in. Whereas I say I've got 80 species in my garden, so you know that was fairly seriously under-recorded. Now there's over 100 recorded there. The best recorded hectare in Northumberland was actually West Newcastle area, which is obviously an urban area where, you know, people are, and therefore, you know, most records were from there. It can't be the most diverse, but it was the most recorded. But if you look at what's happening with the records, so this is which VC, so VC 66 is County Durham, 67 is South Northumberland, 68 is North Northumberland. We've pretty much doubled the number of records in VC 67 and 66 over the last 5 years. 68 is seriously lagging behind. I mean, there are hectares in Northumberland, North Northumberland, where there are virtually no records. So it's well worth getting out there. We should do a trip or go and do some recording. But I see that in the Ladybird report, 8% of all Ladybird records from the UK were from our recording area. No doubt due to the fantastic Ladybird Spot programme. Whereas with Hovers, we're actually the 3rd highest county with records in terms of number of records in 2024, South Northumberland. So 4,000 records was the 3rd highest, which to me is amazing because, number of recorders in Northumberland is nothing what it is in Surrey or, Sussex or somewhere like that. And some of the people who live there record every day, so, even one person could get that many records, you'd have thought, in London. So we've done some good. People understand now that there are Hovers in Northumberland. I asked Roger Morris where he recommended to go in Northumberland when I started doing this. He said, "Oh, don't bother in Northumberland, it's just all sheep pastures, there's no Hovers." He doesn't think that now. So here's an interesting piece of data that's come out from Roger and his colleague Stuart Bull on using the data that they've got. This shows the change in distribution of Leucozonia glauca, which was that little hover that uses hogweed that we looked at before. And I won't go into the detail of how the data's gathered and everything, but basically blue is decrease over 30 or 40 years and red is increase. So in the southeast, Leucozonia glauca has nearly disappeared as a species, and it's now starting to occur in the Western Isles and Western Scotland where it never occurred. We're slightly increasing. But if you looked at this and compared it to a map of the distribution of willow tit over the willow warbler over the same time, or wood warbler, you see exactly the same pattern. These many birds are disappearing from the southeast and either moving northwest or disappearing altogether. So they've looked at different regularly measured factors that might be associated with this change, like median daily temperature, summer rainfall, winter rainfall, all these kind of things. And the single most important predictive factor of this change is soil moisture content. So as summers have got hotter, and presumably summer rainfall has decreased, hasn't it? Although winter rainfall is increasing, I think that's what's happening in our climate. So in the southeast, the undergrowth basically is getting drier and drier, and it's hostile for insects. We see this also in the Amazon even. Like, you go to past the Amazon where there's no interference from pesticides or anything else like that, huge blocks of land, ground nesting species of birds are disappearing. And if you look at insect occurrence in those areas, it's decreasing rapidly. And it can't be due to pesticides. It's almost certainly due to decreasing moisture content in the understory of Amazon rainforest. So we're seeing that in Britain as well. So ponds must be very good. Like a pond with some vegetation that is shading the soil and shading the vegetation, is going to be ideal habitat for a lot of these things. And you were pointing out the insect emergencies from the water. This is all related. What about changes in distribution? Now, obviously, in our area, some of the apparent changes in distribution might just be due to observer effort, because we've got vastly different observer effort now from what we had before. But some of them are real changes. So this is Ringia rostrata, another one of the hovers with the pointy beak. And this was first recorded in Northumberland 4 years ago at Bothell Sawmill. I've now recorded it at about 10 sites in Northumberland. I know other people have recorded it as well. So this is now common in Northumberland, but it hadn't been recorded until 4 years ago. And it was definitely not here. I think, there's no doubt that it's new. And then there's just a list of other hovers that we've recorded new for Northumberland in recent years. So some of these are just observer coverage, definitely. Like, Laphosurfus laponicus is a super rare hobby with only about 50 records in the UK, so that's not surprising that hasn't got many records. Brachiopoeia scutularis is the one that likes pink horse chestnuts, and is, no, Insulenus rather, is the one that likes pink horse chestnuts. Chacosurfus nemorum is a hover of ancient woodland. Now, maybe no one had looked in our ancient woodlands before. I've never recorded it the first 3 years I was looking. I've recorded it the last 2 years. It's been recorded at GNR, and I've seen another couple of records on iRecord recently. So maybe this has actually just arrived, and you know our woodlands are very suitable for it. Maybe it's just been hiding in plain sight, but anyway, it's changing is the big message. Resources. We're on to the third edition of Roger and Stuart Ball's book now. This is the Bible, so nice and easy to use. I find this also quite helpful. The Hoverflies of Britain and North Western Europe is a bit more kind of next step up, and it's got species that only occur in Europe, but for sure some of those probably occur in Britain, even if only as rare immigrants. So that's 2 books. The Facebook group I've mentioned is your starting point. And if you want photos of everything, Stephen Falk's Flickr site is unbelievable. Has anyone looked at his Flickr site before? Yeah, I mean he's got virtually every type of invertebrate, thousands and thousands of photos, beautifully done, loads of information, yeah. If I want to find a species now, I just put Falk Flickr and then the name of the species, and then it comes up on Google search, and yeah, brilliant. If you want any gear, there's lots of places you can buy that, but I tend to get mine from either NHBS or Anglia Lepidoptera. And in terms of recording, I tend to use iRecord. iNaturalist, if you don't know the identity, will help you with the identity. And if an identity is achieved on iNaturalist, then it goes to iRecord anyway, so it probably doesn't matter too much. But I tend to use iRecord. Right, so when I started, I hoped these things. Hopefully we're more fascinated by hovers. I'm very fascinated by hovers. It is addictive, I warn you. If you start on it, it's quite easy to take a deep dive. And I hope we've covered a bit about their phenology and the different fascinating lifestyles they've got and how their larvae survive in different ecological situations. I haven't concentrated on identification, but hopefully we've given you a few ideas on how to find some. And it's only 3 or 4 weeks, and then you can get out and find Melanogyna quadrimaculata. And this is my final slide. For the birders amongst you, if you found a red-flanked bluetail, you'd be really excited, wouldn't you? Maybe there's a dozen records in Northumberland. This is Brachypalpoidus lentus. There's only a dozen records in Northumberland. So, if I go out and I see one of these, I'll think, yeah, that's just the same as having found a red-flanked bluetail in Northumberland, which of course I've never done. But it's actually quite easy to go out and find really superb species that are really scarce and put some dots on the map. This mimics a wood wasp. It's huge. It's like 2/3 the size of your little finger. So ancient woodland hover, also recorded in my arm. Thank you.